We've gotten so many requests for this over the last year and a half that we're going to answer the bell. Coming up, we're relaunching and rebranding a series that we used to feature as a regular entry on this channel. It's one of our most popular shows, the Hit Song Redux. We used to travel back to the golden era of rock to count down the top 10 hits from this very same week. And then after the show, we would tell you what the real top 10 was, based on how much the world had listened to these songs since then. But now we're adding a twist. We're expanding our coverage to the entire top 40 from that week to find out once and for all what song is the real all-time number one hit. We're calling it Test of Time. On this inaugural episode, you're going to hear the story of a heartbreaking confession from a troubled singer-songwriter who didn't find out that he'd lost his closest friend until 6 months after she was gone. So he wrote a classic inside of a psych ward, plus the throwaway song the legend recorded just because he needed an extra song. It was a throwaway. Then 3 years later, after he'd already put out several new albums, someone at his fan club put the 3-year-old reject out for, the fans, and radio started playing it, and it soared to number one in the UK, and then it went to number one in America. He was shocked. Plus the track that unintentionally crowned a rookie band the greatest rockers of all time. They actually meant it to be a joke, but fans took it seriously, and they got it right. Let's do it. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If you remember playing pinball at the arcade back in the day, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now and check the box so you know when our stuff comes out. It's time to see what stands the test of time. I want to go back to when the American Top 40 all started for this inaugural episode. Let's see if you can guess a year. Airport, MASH, and Patton were leading the charge at the box office. On television, you could watch the Mary Tyler Moore Show, The Odd Couple, or Josie and the Pussycats on Saturday mornings. The Apollo 13 mission gripped the world with its dramatic rescue, and the Beatles finalized their breakup, shocking fans amid the release of Let It Be. Do you know the year? The year? 1970, the first year that Casey Kasem launched. But there's a reason why we picked this year, this weekend from this year. This was the year that radio changed forever. LA DJ Casey Kasem launched the American Top 40, a weekly countdown show that would become a cultural phenomenon and would inspire generations of listeners. The AT40, the AT40, whatever you call it, they brought America's biggest hits directly into homes every single week, counting down the top 40, from Billboard Magazine's Hot 100 chart.
American Top 40. On American Top 40, I'm Casey Kasem.
Casey, one of my heroes, he hosted the show for more than 18 years before signing off on the 6th of August, 1988. But the magic wasn't over. The American Top 40 returned with Casey behind the mic on March 28th, 1998, continuing until January 3rd, 2004. In the interim, from 89 to 98, Kasem, he kept counting down the hits with Casey's Top 40. But the American Top 40 is the most iconic part of his legacy for sure. Through it all, Casey helped us discover new music and learn the stories behind the hits, inspire me to do what I do today. For this show, we're revisiting the last week of December, 1970, hard to believe, 55 years ago, to find out which top 40 hits from the Billboard Hot 100 have stood the test of time to become the biggest songs from the era. In honor of Casey, we'll tell you what was the actual top 10 for the week, but we're going to find what songs were the all-time hits over the decades. Of course, to figure this out, we've totaled up the streaming numbers from all the platforms that make them publicly available, Spotify, YouTube, a few others. And along the way, you'll find out where each song ranked back in 1970. And like Casey, I'll tell you the stories behind the songs. So let's get started. We've also got some special guests. So starting off the Redux Countdown at number 10 with a total of 77 million streams, it's Badfinger with No Matter What.
No matter what you do.
Coincidentally, No Matter What was also the number 10 song for this very same week in 1970, on its way down from its number 8 peak position a couple weeks earlier. Originally signed to Apple Records as the Ivies, the lineup consisted of vocalist Pete Ham, drummer Mike Gibbons, guitarist Tom Evans, and bassist Ron Griffiths. After releasing the album Maybe Tomorrow and a couple of unsuccessful singles, the band rebranded to become Badfinger. Griffiths left in September of '69, and he was, of course, replaced by Joey Molland, who just passed away just recently. And the new lineup then enjoyed an immediate hit on both sides of the Atlantic with Come and Get It, written by their label boss, Paul McCartney. In order to increase their public profile, though, Badfinger contributed to the soundtrack of the movie The Magic Christian, starring Peter Sellers and Ringo Starr. The Beatles' backing was reinforced by Badfinger's sound, which had strong traces of the Fab Four influence. No Matter What definitely has that familiar Beatles flavor to it.
No matter where you go.
However, get this, Apple Records executives didn't like this song and they did not want to release it, even though Paul McCartney had written it and had that Beatles-esque feel. Now, Badfinger ultimately won the dispute, and No Matter What was issued as the only single from their third studio album, No Dice. Although they should have released another one from the album. You may recognize the album Cut Without You, which was released by Harry Nilsson later the next year and became a #1 smash.
If living is without you.
No Matter What went on to lock in Badfinger's reputation as one of Power Pop's founding forces. I mean, their blend of jangly guitars, rich harmonies, and heartfelt songwriting captured the lingering spirit of the Beatles era while carving out a style all their own. Do you remember when the rumor was that Badfinger was secretly the Beatles? That went around for a long time and people believed that one. All right, next up, it's the Partridge Family with Shirley Jones and David Cassidy. The song is I Think I Love You.
Screaming out the words I dread. I think I love you.
This week on the App 40, it was hovering at the #6 spot. It actually went to #1 overall. But decades later, the track has garnered over 82 million streams, which is enough to put it at #9 on our countdown. So David Cassidy and his real-life stepmother actress Shirley Jones were the only members of the fictitious television family group to be heard on their actual records. A lot of people don't realize that. Jones, who starred in hit film musicals like Oklahoma and Carousel and The Music Man, she married David's father, actor Jack Cassidy, in 1956. Partridge Family, of course, the humorous series about a family pop group, it debuted on television on September 25th, 1970 and ran through 1974. The Partridge Family was based on the family band The Cowsills, who had a hit called The Rain, The Park, and Other Things back in 1967. Great band. Like the Monkees, though, the Partridge Family was created for their TV series and released music under those band names. The Partridge Family's debut single, I Think I Love You, that was written by Tony Romeo, who also wrote songs for the Seekers, the Everly Brothers, and Richard Harris.
I think I love you, so what am I so afraid of?
I Think I Love You was used twice in the first season of the TV series, with producers taking care not to show too much footage of the band playing the song. I don't know why. They didn't want to promote it, you'd think. The Partridge Family didn't perform the full song, though, until the 12th episode.
I think I love you.
By this time, the song was already a huge hit. In less than 2 years, the TV family put another 6 singles and albums into the U.S. Top 40, including the top 10 successes, Doesn't Somebody Want to Be Wanted, and I'll Meet You Halfway.
Doesn't somebody want to be wanted like me? I'll meet you halfway.
When the U.S. popularity began to wane, the series took off in the U.K., and it gave them 5 UK top 20 hits. The show made Cassidy a transatlantic teen idol. He also had a run of solo hits, of course.
Let me ask you to your face, do you think you love me?
Make sure to get your Vintage Years collection. We've got a special going throughout the rest of the year. Get them right up here or below at the link, celebrating a great year in music. Coming in at the #8 spot, it's Smokey Robinson and the Miracles with The Tears of a Clown.
Like a clown, I pretend to be glad.
This is a hard-to-believe story, but this would be Smokey's only #1 hit. It reached the top 10 on December 12, 1970, just a couple weeks earlier. Today it has just over 100 million streams, about 106. And this one is an incredible, improbable story. If you count all the hits Smokey had solo and with the Miracles, it adds up to 36. But out of all those, only one went to #1. It's an insane tale here. Okay, so Stevie Wonder wrote this song. He'd written the music with a Motown producer named Hank Crosby. But they couldn't get the lyrics down. So Stevie gave it to Smokey, who listened to it, and he thought it sounded like a circus. It was kind of a crazy song.
The tears of a clown when there's no.
And that inspired the lyrics, The Tears of a Clown. It was released in 1967. It was on the album Make It Happen. However, the song wasn't released as a single at the time. Smokey didn't think anything of it, and Stevie didn't either. Nobody thought it could be a hit, so it was just an album track. All right, so we fast forward 3 years into the future, and in the United Kingdom, in the UK, Smokey and the Miracles had not had much success at all. In fact, Motown hadn't had much success. Their British distributor was so frustrated that he asked Karen Spreadbury, who was the head of the Motown fan club in England, to pick a single from the Make It Happen album. And she chose The Tears of a Clown, the last song on the album. And when it was released, put it out there for fans and radio started playing it, it blew up. It went to #1 in the UK in August of 1970. And Motown was shocked. But they acted quickly and they released The Tears of a Clown in America. And by December, it went all the way to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, giving the group their first and only #1 Hot 100 hit with Smokey, like I said. It's just crazy, though, because nobody thought it could be a hit. Here's what Smokey told me about that.
We recorded Tears of a Clown in 1967. The Miracles and I recorded it in 1967. And I thought it was just an album cut. We put it on this album. I think the album was called Four in Blue or something like that. Well, I forget the name of the album. Anyway, I wrote the song and recorded it on The Miracles and Me, and we put it on this album in 1967. In 1970, a girl who worked for Motown in England, worked at the Motown office in England, was playing that album in the office. Tears of a Clown came on and she loved it. The guy who was the head of our office in England at that time was a guy named Peter. And she took it to Peter and said, "Hey, Peter, we should release this here in the UK because it's a great song." So Peter agreed with her and they released it there. And it became, I think it went to #1 in the UK or something like that.
Yeah, it did. It did. It became a really hit.
And Motown had never had a #1 record in the UK. And it started to snowball all over Europe. I had another record ready to go out in the States. And I told Barry, I said, "I got this great record." He said, no, man. We're putting out Tears of a Clown here, which we did. And, to this moment, Tears of a Clown is the biggest single record as an artist I've ever been associated with.
All right, coming in at #7, I've got one of my favorite voices ever, Karen Carpenter and Richard, the Carpenters with We've Only Just Begun. So this one peaked at #2 on the Billboard Hot 100, but on this week back in 1970, it was sitting at #15. The song currently boasts 130 million streams and counting. It's one of the biggest wedding songs of all time, but it actually started out as a bank commercial. We've talked about this, but here's a few more details. 1968, Crocker Bank wanted to attract young couples and newlyweds to open accounts, so they commissioned a TV spot featuring a young couple starting their married life, and they needed a song to go with it. So they brought in Paul Williams and Roger Nichols, the songwriters. And Richard Carpenter happened to see the commercial late one night, and he tracked these guys down, and he knew that Karen would be perfect for this song, a bank commercial song. The Carpenters recorded it in mid-1970, and the single dropped in August of 70, started climbing the Hot 100 and the adult contemporary chart. Paul Williams didn't fully grasp the song's power until he heard Karen's performance. When he first heard the finished version, he was floored. He proclaimed that Karen sang like an angel, and of course he was correct. Richard later declared the song has become our signature tune. Crazy.
Just begun.
All right, coming in at the #6 position, I've got the Jackson 5, who had previously peaked on the Hot 100 at #1 with I'll Be There. But by this week in December 1970, the song had fallen to #16. Today, I'll Be There boasts roughly 260 million streams, which is good enough for #6 on our countdown. The Jackson 5 was, of course, comprised of brothers Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and Michael. Raised in Gary, Indiana by their father, Joe, who was a blues guitarist. The Jacksons started playing local clubs in 1962 with a young prodigy Michael Jackson as their lead vocalist. Combining dance routines influenced by the Temptations with music inspired by the great James Brown, they first recorded for the Steeltown label before auditioning for Motown in 1968. Everybody says they were discovered by Diana Ross, but it was actually Gladys Knight. A team of Motown writers known as the Corporation composed a series of songs for their early releases, but their debut single from Motown, I Want You Back, became the fastest-selling record in the label's history in 1969, and 3 of their next 5 singles topped the American chart, including this one, I'll Be There. It was released as the first single from their third album, fittingly titled Third Album. In his autobiography, Moonwalk, Michael explained that I'll Be There was the song that solidified the Jackson 5's career, showed audiences that the group had serious potential. Although the Jackson 5 never landed another number one on the Hot 100 after it, they stayed on the charts throughout the 70s and became the Jacksons in 1976. Michael had his first number one as a solo artist with Ben just a couple of years later, and reached new heights at the end of the decade with Off the Wall that came out in 79, and then, of course, the biggest selling album of all time, Thriller. All right, we're halfway through the countdown, and so far we've heard 5 songs that have stood the test of time. No Matter What, I Think I Love You, The Tears of a Clown, We've Only Just Begun, and I'll Be There. But we still got 5 more to go, and leading off the second half charge, I've got the legendary Carlos Santana with his timeless take on Black Magic Woman.
Got a black magic woman.
So this one actually peaked at number 5 on This Week back in the December of 1970. It currently has almost 500 million streams on Spotify and YouTube and others, which is enough for the halfway mark on our countdown. It's become a rock classic, but Black Magic Woman, of course, written by Peter Green for Fleetwood Mac in 1968.
She's a black magic woman and she's trying to make a devil out of me.
However, when Carlos got a hold of it with Greg Rowley on vocals, it forever after became known as Santana's track. Santana's version of Black Magic Woman took Green's blues tune and transformed it into a hypnotic Latin rock epic. Of course, the song is truly built on Santana's sustained-drenched guitar lines, Raleigh's Hammond organ, and a layered rhythm section of drums and congas and timbales that gave the song its signature slow, simmering groove. Although Black Magic Woman was not part of Santana's legendary 1969 Woodstock set, the festival's massive exposure primed audiences and radio for the band's 1970 album Abraxas, where Black Magic Woman segued into Gypsy Queen and became a standout track. Here's what Carlos told me about Black Magic Woman.
There was such a beautiful energy of us loving Peter Green and Gabor Sawa and Tito Puente.
Got a black magic woman, she's got me so blind I can't see. She's a black magic woman, she's trying to be.
Peter Green collects royalties, but it's our Black Magic Woman now. Because to me, Black Magic Woman came from all your love, pretty baby.
Have in store for you.
Got a black. To me, it's the same thing. Just you change the lyrics, So, so Santana, like I said, it's a commonality of gumbo of a lot of people. At least 2 to 3 times a year, I send some serious money to Artist Rush. I have to, and I will continue to.
That's amazing.
To honor the song that I play every night.
All right, we've made it all the way to number 4 in the survey, and I don't think anybody will be surprised that this one has stood the test of time and one of the greatest songs ever. It currently has more than 500 million streams, which of course enough to get it close to the top of the countdown. The song is Fire and Rain by the great James Taylor.
I've seen fire and I've seen rain.
And although it would climb all the way to number 3, but by this point in its charts history, on This Week, it was down to number 35. Fire and Rain, you think about it, it's not a song at all. It's a fervent prayer. Desperate prayer. Fire and Rain is woven out of multiple devastating stories from James Taylor's life, each one cutting deeper than the last. When he pleads to Jesus in prayer, asking him for help, it's one of the most heart-wrenching moments in a song ever.
Down upon me, Jesus, you gotta help me make a stand.
In fact, for me personally, this song was a lifeline when I found out that my dad had passed away, and I just broke down when I heard that part, and it always it makes my lip quiver every time it comes on. The story starts out in his teen years, though. James was a bright kid wowing crowds at coffee houses, but, depression was destroying him from the inside out. School became torture. He tried college prep, but it wasn't for him. He switched to public high school, and then he dropped out his junior year. The Taylor family, though, carried dark burdens. Mental illness and addiction ran through their bloodline. They even owned a sanitarium to help relatives kick their habits. James' father battled alcoholism. His older brother Alex fought substance abuse. So in James's late teens, his friend Danny Korchmar convinced him to check out of McLean Psychiatric Hospital after a long and difficult stay there. They moved to New York, and they actually formed a band called The Flying Machine. But the band's drummer, Joel O'Brien, introduced JT to heroin, and the addiction took hold fast. When The Flying Machine collapsed at the demo stage, it crushed James Taylor. That moment lives in the lyric "Sweet dreams and flying machines in pieces on the ground."
Sweet dreams and flying machines in pieces on the ground.
With no band and a fierce heroin dependency, James Taylor, he just spiraled out of control. He'd play guitar in Washington Square Park while letting runaways and criminals crash at his place to get high. His manager bailed, and then James hit rock bottom. Desperate, he called his father, who flew to New York and drove him back to North Carolina. 6 months of treatment followed, plus throat surgery to repair his vocal cords. After recovery, James Taylor moved to London chasing his solo dream. Korchmar connected him with Peter Asher at the Beatles' Apple Records. A lot of Apple Records references in this chart. Paul McCartney and George Harrison loved his demos. Apple signed him immediately. But while James was in London, the deepest wound struck. His close friend, Suzanne Schneer, she shared his battle with depression. She had been institutionalized in isolation, and she took her own life at just 20 years of age. But James actually didn't find out for 6 months. People around him kept it a secret. They were terrified he'd destroy his shot at success. When he did finally learn the truth, he channeled that grief into Fire and Rain. And that opening line says it all. Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone.
Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone.
All right, in at number 3, we have the ex-Beatle George Harrison with My Sweet Lord.
My sweet Lord.
Originally coming in at number 1 on this week's Ab 40 Countdown back in 1970, My Sweet Lord would be Harrison's first solo single, the first of 3 number 1 hits on the Billboard Hot 100. Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth, that went to number 1 in 73 and Got My Mind Set on You, reached the top spot in 1987.
Love, give me peace on earth. I got my mind set on you.
To date, My Sweet Lord has accumulated almost 1 billion streams on Spotify and YouTube. And as you may well know, this is one of the most storied songs out there. Now, George Harrison grew up attending Catholic school, but he felt spiritually empty with conventional Western Christianity. So he started searching for something deeper, something that would be more meaningful to him. That was his journey. In 1968, George Harrison discovered the Hare Krishna movement through recordings and devotees in London. He was immediately captivated, buying Krishna records and even sponsoring recordings. By September 1969, when Swami Prabhupada, the movement's founder, came to London and stayed at John Lennon's estate, George was already deep into Krishna consciousness. Meeting Swami in person confirmed and deepened that commitment, fueling his creative fire. Now, the inspiration for My Sweet Lord came later in 1969 while Harrison was in Copenhagen with Eric Clapton and Billy Preston. George asked Billy how to write a gospel song, and they started jamming backstage. Preston played gospel-flavored tunes while everyone sang Oh My Lord and Hallelujah, and George channeled that soulful energy into the verses, as you can hear. George Harrison envisioned the song as a manifesto of spiritual unity, tearing down religious barriers. This song was for everyone. And he brilliantly blended Hallelujah with Hare Krishna chants from Vedic prayer. The message was universal, a direct connection with the divine that anyone could embrace. The recording sessions, they were legendary. Phil Spector co-produced, and the lineup was stacked, though. Eric Clapton and Peter Frampton on acoustic guitars, Pete Ham and Joey Molland from Badfinger, Gary Brooker on piano, and Klaus Vormann on bass, and of course Ringo Starr on drums. George overdubbed all the backing vocals himself under the pseudonym the George O'Hara Smith Singers. We've talked about it before, but George Harrison unknowingly ripped off the 1960s classic He's So Fine by the Chiffons, and a long lawsuit found him guilty of accidental plagiarism. Craziest part is that during the lawsuit, the Chiffons put out a cover of the song that they were claiming ripped them off.
Lord, I really want to know you, Lord.
My Sweet Lord became the first #1 hit by a former Beatle. Went gold in December 1970. It sold over 1 million copies and topped the Hot 100 for 4 weeks, while the album simultaneously hit #1. The song conquered over 20 countries and became the UK's biggest single of 1971. All right, we're to #2, and the #1 and #2 songs were very close. In fact, they probably swap places every single month, because that's how close they are ranked. But this one's a song that went to #8, which isn't bad, but this one is one of the biggest songs ever. It's Your Song by Sir Elton John.
Can tell everybody this is your song.
Like I said, it only peaked at #8 back in the Hot 100. Not bad, but today it's become a beloved entry in Elton's catalog, telling just under 1.4 billion streams. Elton John and Bernie Taupin's legendary partnership started when a record company handed Elton some of Bernie's lyrics to work with, and the chemistry was instantaneous. Eventually, both young musicians moved into Elton's parents' house in the London suburbs, where they turned the kitchen into their creative headquarters. There, young Bernie Taupin sat down at the kitchen table over breakfast and rapidly scribbled out the lyrics to Your Song on just a grubby piece of paper. The original manuscript still has coffee stains on it, and it's worth millions. As Bernie later explained, he was writing from the heart of someone whose experience with love was completely new and innocent. When Bernie finished, Elton took those raw, honest words and hammered out the aching piano melody in about 10 or 15 minutes. He was so excited, he hollered for Bernie to dash upstairs and hear it immediately.
You don't mind that I put down in words.
Your Song captures that dizzy first love rush with brutal honesty, some of the best lyrics ever penned. The narrator admits he's broke and can't afford grand romantic gestures. I don't have much money, but boy, if I did, I'd buy a big house where we both could live. He forgets her eye color, but can't shake the overwhelming pull of her presence. It's awkward, it's real, but it's completely captivating. This was a song that I actually caught my own dad dancing with my mom in the room as kind of a joke, and it really touched my heart as a young child watching my dad kind of use this as a big romantic gesture with my mom. Gosh, the memories you have from music.
Big house where we both could live.
But who's it about? Well, Elton has always maintained the song isn't about anyone specific, and Bernie has refused to reveal if there was ever a real person who inspired it, although there have been rumors. Imagine it, one of the most famous songs ever that was written about someone who will go to their grave never knowing the song was about them. I mean, this song is so genuine, like I said, a snapshot of young, naive love that's just become so universal. Elton and Bernie recorded it simply at Trident Studios with producer Gus Dudgeon. But man, the late Paul Buckmaster's soaring strings elevated the emotion of this song to another level entirely. Released on the 1970 Elton John album, Your Song arrived during Elton's explosive Troubadour Club residency in LA, where audiences were weeping and screaming. The track became their first major breakthrough.
Life is while you're in the world.
All right, we've made it to #1, and it's crazy because this song was actually just a minor hit back in the day. It wouldn't even be considered a major hit. It only went to #16. But I love it because it's much bigger than its chart position and one of the biggest songs of all time. I've got Led Zeppelin with Immigrant Song. This one's racked up 1.4 billion streams across YouTube and Spotify. And the origins of Immigrant Song, they trace back to June of 1970, right after Jimmy Page and Robert Plant's retreat to Branyarar, of course, the 18th century cottage in Wales. Fresh off that acoustic creative burst, Led Zeppelin headed to Iceland for a cultural exchange show on June 22nd. That Icelandic experience hit Robert Plant like a lightning bolt. The Viking history, the midnight sun, the hot springs, it all poured into what would become Immigrant Song. Robert Plant channeled that inspiration into lyrics steeped in Norse mythology. We come from the land of the ice and snow, from the midnight sun where the hot springs flow. 6 days later, on June 28th, Zeppelin debuted the song live at the Bath Festival in front of roughly 200,000 people. Melody Maker, I love this. They described it as an onslaught, with drums and bass reverberating like cannon fire and Jimmy Page's guitar cutting through the twilight like a broadsword. It was clear they had one of the greatest rockers ever in their hands. I mean, musically, Immigrant Song, it's pure fist-in-the-air rock explosiveness. How can you not sing along to it? Jimmy Page's insanely effective guitar riff is a reverberating thunderbolt. Bonzo's galloping drum beat creates the feeling of riding headlong into combat. And Robert Plant's chilling, banshee-like battle cry, it's pure vocal carnage. At just 2 minutes and 26 seconds, the song leaves you wanting more every single time you play it. The lyrics dive deep into the Viking invasions of the British Isles. The hammer of the gods will drive our ships to new lands. That references Thor's hammer and the conquest it represents. I mean, the song was written to be entirely tongue-in-cheek, but its humor was almost completely lost on listeners. In fact, this fist-in-the-air rocker, it was so power-packed that legions lined up to crown Led Zeppelin the lords of rock and roll after hearing it. And by then, it was too late to convince anyone that they were more or less just joking in the song, taking to the highest levels of music. The joke became the truth. So there you have it. The top 10 songs that have stood the test of time from the last week of December in 1970. Were you surprised by any of these entries? For the record, though, the original top 10 back then included a few more songs that didn't make the cut on the Redux here. In the actual top 10 of this week, these are the songs that didn't make the cut. There was Gypsy Woman by Brian Hyland.
She was a gypsy woman.
Do you remember that one? Also, Chicago with Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is? That barely missed.
Does anybody really know what time it is?
There's also Stone Love by the Supremes and Dawn with Knock 3 Times. Last of all, One Less Bell to Answer by the Fifth Dimension.
Stone love means you meet me in the hallway.
One less bell to answer.
So that actually means that 5 of the former top 10s from this week in 1970 have not stood the test of time, or not as well as these other 10 songs. I think it's interesting to go back and see what really did make it happen. These songs were replaced by the Carpenters, the Jackson 5, James Taylor, Led Zeppelin, and Elton John that had a more lasting impact. Make sure to leave us a comment. What do you think about these songs? What are your memories of these songs? Would you like to see more of these? I think it's interesting to go back and see what were the real songs and what have they done since then. Songs that have lasted through generation after generation after generation. So let's have a great discussion below. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe.